a letter and had transmitted Billy some of the scrolls. Actually, all that he had left at that time was the first 36 chapters, of which apparently there was about 200 chapters altogether. So he, about 100 chapters. So he sent what he had, which is what we have today. Billy then got them translated in German, and there was a translation in English for us to read. So what we have are the not the original writings of Emmanuel, but the original writings of Judas Iscariot, his scribe, talking all about the teachings of Emmanuel and his life story. Now, what's left of these scrolls is put into a book called the Talmud Emmanuel, and it deals with his life. As you'll see, I'm going to go over the book now for you and tell you what's in it. It will deal with his life up through the crucifixion and beyond as he moves into Damascus and then into India. Also, at the beginning of the book, there's a little forward there, an explanation by Billy all about the book and how it came about and the story of it, which is pretty much what I just got through explaining. And there's also a picture of what Emmanuel looked in there, how he looked. Now, it's not exactly a picture, it's a drawing. He at one point had asked Semjase if she could draw a picture of Emmanuel so he could put it in this book. And she was a little concerned. She said, well, why don't you draw it yourself? You're quite handy, and you know what he looks like. And he says, well, I don't have the talent for the drawing. Besides, it'd be better if you did it. And so she agreed, and she drew a picture of what Emmanuel actually looked like. And that's in the very beginning of the book, so you get to see that. It's just a hand drawing done with, like with pen, so you can see. And as you can see from this picture, that he doesn't really look anything like, the usual pictures we see of a young, blonde, smiley, happy-looking face fellow. He doesn't look like that at all. Billy once told me that he's the same height I am, which is roughly about 5'11", and a half. And he weighed about 170 pounds, 175 pounds. He had a very heavy build, broad shoulders, heavy hands like a farmer. He was a Jewish boy with dark curly hair. So he doesn't, and this is what the picture looks like, the drawing that Semjase did. So he doesn't look exactly like the images that we're usually seeing and so forth of him. Interesting to know, when you see this picture, your thoughts will probably reflect to the Shroud of Turin. They're sometimes called the Death Shroud or the Death Cloth. And this is supposed to be the cloth that Emmanuel was wrapped in after he was taken down from the crucifixion cross. And it's supposed to contain the likeness of Emmanuel, and there's been arguments for years over its authenticity. Billy says that the drawing in the book should prove to you that it's not, because it doesn't look anything like the image that we generally see from the Shroud of Turin. Billy says the Shroud of Turin is fake, it's not real. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what's in the Talmud Emmanuel. It's about 100 pages long, and much of it is pretty much the Bible stories that you've heard and aren't too much different. But the beginning of it is certainly different, because it explains very well from Emmanuel's viewpoint who he was, who his father was, and how he got his knowledge. And this is quite a bit different than what you've been told in Bible school. So that's the main part I want to go over. I'll also tell you how you can get a copy of the book, because the book now is published in America. It's almost a secret, though. You'd have a lot of trouble finding it, but I'll tell you where you can get it, and I'll put the address down at the end for you here so you can order that book if you'd like. Okay. I have a copy of the book here with me as I'm doing this, because there's so many names and things in it, and some of the areas of this book I want to quote to you exactly, because I want to make sure I get them right. This is not a book on just theory and philosophy that you just want to talk about. There's some really very interesting passageways in this book. To begin with, when a book first starts out, it goes through the genealogical tree of Emmanuel, tracing him back to his origins, so you can see actually where he actually came from. So actually I'm going to read you the first part right here so you can be very clear on this. This is the book and secret of Emmanuel, which means God with us, who is the son of Joseph, of Jacob, the distant descendant of David, whose lineage goes back to Adam, the father of man of the earth, who was created by Semjase, ending with an A, the leader of the sons of heaven, who were the guardian angels of God, the great ruler of those who traveled from afar. So already here, we're having testimony here by Judas Iscariot that the Emmanuel himself, his origin then is becoming from the guardian angels of God, those who traveled from afar. Then it goes on to say, Semjase, the heavenly sons and guardian angel of God, the great ruler of those who travel from far away through the space of the universe, created with an earth wife, Adam, the father of the wise, intelligent race. Well, we heard earlier in the contact notes also about Semjase, how he created Adam, and then he created another woman, an Eva, and coupled them together and started this genealogical chain, which is going to end up with Emmanuel. Adam took an earth wife and created Seth. And then it shows in the book here, it shows you the entire tree. Seth created Enos, Enos created Achabiel. It goes all the way through down 80 generations to the point where Jacob created Joseph. Now Joseph, of course, is the stepfather of Emmanuel because he was not the real parental father. Joseph was the spouse of Mary, the mother of Emmanuel, who became pregnant by a distant descendant of the son Rachel, who was the guardian angel of the secret. It doesn't say much more about this. Rachel, he's not Emmanuel's father either. He somehow is the, I guess he's the father of Emmanuel's father. At any rate, it goes on to explain here that actually Emmanuel's father was Gabriel, a messenger who impregnated Mary, and he was one of the guardian angels of the sons of heaven. He was a Pleiadian, by the way. So it goes on to explain that, and then it explains, of course, the story how this actually happened. That a guardian angel then comes to Joseph, who is Gabriel, and explains how important it is to Joseph that he actually marry Mary. Now, Joseph, of course, had found out that Mary was pregnant, and in those times, even as it would be now, that if you were engaged to someone and she suddenly became pregnant by someone else, you'd have a few questions. And then you probably would decide that could be caused to even cancel the wedding. And Joseph had thought those ways also. So Gabriel came to him and explained to him how important it was that Mary had been impregnated 11,000 years after Semjase created Adam to fulfill the prophecy of God, who spoke through the prophet, I believe it's pronounced Jesaja, Jesaja. Those of you who are into the history of this may know better than I. He prophesied that, behold, a virgin will be impregnated by a son of heaven before she is married to a man before the people. By the way, you should know that Mary herself, who was Emmanuel's mother, was Illyrian by descent. God and his followers came from afar, from the depths of the universe, and created a new race with the early women of this earth. And that's exactly what really happened. So, and according to this book, it says, honor of the man of earth is due God, for behold, he is the true originator of the white, wise generations of people on earth. You see, the gods, the celestial sons, were of Illyrian descent, who were a white race, very blue-eyed, sometimes green-eyed people, and were the, you might say, the more beautiful-looking people. And they created, when they intermingled with the then developing earth human beings here on earth, who were brown-skinned, they created their own white race here, which was far better looking and more evolved than the developing earth human beings, who were not as old and were not nearly as developed. So this is what they're referring to. It also goes on to say that God reigns over the earth, the Lord of the celestial sons and men of this white race. Now bear in mind also that when the Pleiadians are talking about God, they're talking about there are many gods. God is a king of wisdom. He is an Ishwish. And there have been many gods on different planets. There is not just one God. They're referring to the God over the three developed human races here on earth. God is the lawgiver of this human race, and his wishes shall be obeyed. Mary became pregnant by the law of God. It was decreed that Emmanuel be born. Gabriel was chosen as the father, Mary was chosen as the mother, and so that what was filled was the law of God. So Joseph hears this and he agrees to wed Mary, and we know about that at any rate. So of course they are married. Mary is already impregnated, and by the way, it was not done with any magic, possibly with some sort of artificial insemination. We don't know for sure, but it was either that or it was physical. At the time, Caesar Augustus decreed that a census of the world should be happening. We know about that, and that's what brought Joseph and Mary into Bethlehem, because that's where Joseph's origins were. That's where his family came from. So he returned there to be counted. And the time they were there, apparently it was pretty busy in town, and it was time for Mary to have her baby, but there was no room. At the inns, they couldn't find any room, so they had to sleep in the straw, of course, outside, and Emmanuel was born in the straw. Well, at the time, Herod Antipas, who is the governor, hears of the birth from some wise men. Apparently what has happened, that there's a light in the sky, like a big tail of the comet, they call it, and 3 wise men come all the way from the Orient. They hear voices from this light in the sky, and they are told that a great king of wisdom has been born, and they should follow this. They do. They come all the way from the Orient, and they appear before Herod Antipas, and explain that they had followed this light in the sky, that they heard that a great and powerful new king had been born, which will bring great wisdom to the people. So they follow it. Herod was very frightened by this, as we read in our own Bible stories, and thought this new king might exercise some cruel power. He was probably rather concerned that it might throw him out of office. And he wanted to know where this newborn child was. Well, the 3 wise men told Herod that, he says, well, in Bethlehem, in the Jewish land, for it was written by the prophet Micah. And so at this point they didn't know exactly where, but they were quite sure that it was going to be in Bethlehem because of this prophecy. Well, Herod asked the wise men to continue on, to go to Bethlehem and see this young child, and then let him know exactly where it was, because he wanted to follow up himself to adore this young child. Well, the 3 wise men then took off on their own, and again they followed the light in the sky that led them to Bethlehem, and where they found this new child, Emmanuel, born there with Mary. And of course they brought their gifts, which we've all heard about, of gold, incense, and myrrh. Right after they had been there and given their gifts, again the light appeared in the sky, it says, and a voice from the sky told the 3 wise men not to return to Herod, as he had planned harm to the child. Well, the 3 wise men, that was enough for them, so instead of going back to Herod, they took a different path and went back to the Orient their own way, on a different way home. Gabriel then appeared to Joseph and told him to take the child and go to Egypt. Because of the problem with Herod, he didn't want the child harmed in any way, so he told Joseph, take the child to Egypt and I'll deal with Herod, and I will let you know when it's time to return. After a period of time, apparently Gabriel has done whatever he did, sent a messenger to Herod or whatever, calmed Herod down, who then has a change of heart and pronounces that he is no longer has any, I guess you call it, a grudge against this newborn child, and now that he understands that he is merely a king of wisdom. So Joseph and Mary return, they leave Egypt, and they return to Galilee, where they live in the city of Nazareth. And this then fulfills the prophecy that says that the Nazarene shall be called Emmanuel, because now he lives back in the city of Nazareth. At a certain age, and I don't know what it is, Emmanuel goes to John the Baptist, who at that time was preaching at the banks of the Jordan River. He was preaching according to the laws of God, the same that Emmanuel had learned. He was preaching that the creation was the holder of the secret of secrets, that God was the ruler of the human race, but also revered creation. And people from Jerusalem and Judea all over came to be baptized by John. He again thrashed out at the Pharisees and called them vipers and so forth, and was speaking strongly for the teachings of God. Emmanuel came to him, and when he did, John was surprised and says, well, I need to be baptized by you, for you are of greater wisdom than I. Emmanuel says, let it happen now, for it is up to us to fulfill all justice, since we are both sons of the earth. So John baptized Emmanuel. Shortly right after that, as Emmanuel comes out of the river after he's been baptized, there's a bright light all overhead, and everyone falls to the ground. Out of this light there's a great voice that says, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. He will be the King of truth, which shall lift this human race to knowledge. Well, Emmanuel rises and is immediately lifted up into this metallic light and ascends up into the sky. Emmanuel was not seen then for 40 days or 40 nights. He was taken by these guardian angels to a place, it says, between the winds of the north and the west, to learn the secrets of wisdom. There he spent his days with the wise saints of God. That at all. Billy once told me that he's the same height I am, which is roughly about 5'11", 5'11 and a half. And he weighed about 170 pounds, 175 pounds. He had a very heavy build, broad shoulders, heavy hands like a farmer. He was a Jewish boy with dark curly hair. So he doesn't, and this is what the picture looks like, the drawing that Semjase did. So he doesn't look exactly like the images that we're usually seeing. And he says, well, I don't have the talent for the drawing, besides it'd be better if you did it. And so she agreed, and she drew a picture of what Emmanuel actually looked like. And that's in the very beginning of the book, so you get to see that. It's just a hand drawing done with, like with pen, so you can see. And as you can see from this picture, that he doesn't really look anything like, the usual pictures we see of a young, blonde, smiley, happy-looking face fellow. He doesn't look like writings of Emmanuel, but the original writings of Judas Iscariot, his scribe, talking all about the teachings of Emmanuel and his life story. Now, what's left of these scrolls is put into a book called the Talmud Emmanuel, and it deals with his life. As you'll see, I'm going to go over the book now for you and tell you what's in it. It will deal with his life up through the crucifixion and beyond, as he moves into Damascus and then into India. Also, at the beginning of the book, there's a little forward there, an explanation by Billy all about the book and how it came about, and the story of it, which is pretty much what I just got through explaining. And there's also a picture of what Emmanuel looked in there, how he looked. Now, it's not exactly a picture, it's a drawing. He at one point had asked Semjase if she could draw a picture of Emmanuel so he could put it in this book. And she was a little concerned. She said, well, why don't you draw it yourself? You're quite handy, and you know what he looks like. A letter, and had transmitted Billy some of the scrolls. Actually, all that he had left at that time was the first 36 chapters, of which apparently there was about 200 chapters altogether. So he, about 100 chapters. So he sent what he had, which is what we have today. Billy then got them translated in German, and there was a translation in English for us to read. So what we have are not the original